You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
So it's May Day. May Day is International Workers' Day. May Day is the real Labor Day. That is every country across the world, except for the United States, celebrates Labor Day on May the 1st. David, Adam, why does every other country celebrate Labor Day on May the 1st?
Well, I'll start. May Day, International Workers' Day, there's a reason the United States does not, and that is primarily the association with the left. The United States obviously wants to keep it in the dark, the origins of the labor movement and the origins of May Day. And May Day really came out of the United States, ironically enough. Mm-hmm. So we're the one country that doesn't really celebrate it, but it came out of events that occurred here in Chicago back in 1886, I believe. And that was one of, unfortunately, very many incidents we've had of police violence against workers and against strikers in particular.
Yeah. I mean, there was one of the big things was the Haymarket Massacre, and there was a bomb that had been detonated during a general strike in Chicago on May Day or thereabouts, and there were some people that were framed and they were executed for it, and really not good stuff. And so, like, the rest of the world kind of honors the May Day massacre or the May Day martyrs that were killed in Chicago, and they don't want to do that here in the U.S. because they were anarchists and part of the left and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because we celebrate May Day, or we celebrate Labor Day in September, and that was kind of a coordinated effort, like Adam said, by the more conservative wing of the business unions, the American Federation of Labor, before they combined with the CIO. The American Federation of Labor was more craft and skilled trades, and they kind of had a very lofty vision of themselves. They didn't really kind of consider themselves the same as unskilled, quote-unquote, laborers, and so they had a more cooperative vision of how they ought to associate with management. So they worked with bosses, and they worked with and they worked with the United States government to set up Labor Day in September so that we don't have to remember the history of Labor Day in America, because the history of Labor Day is really a radical history, and it's something that it's something that is really important for unionists, whatever your kind of political ideology is, to recognize the contributions of radicals and leftists and militants and anarchists and socialists and communists to the labor movement. The labor movement was at its strongest and most powerful, and the bosses feared it the most when it was led by radicals, like it was in the late 19th and early 20th century, and that's why they wanted to celebrate Labor Day in September instead of in May, so that they could cut us off from that history, and so that they could make you think that to cut you off from the radical history and cut you off from class consciousness and cut you off from the possibilities that you have, because like I said in the opening, labor creates all wealth. That's a radical idea, but it's true. I mean, if you just think about it for more than a few seconds, the retort to that is like, oh, well, what about investment? Well, where did they get the money to invest from? They got it from profits that was created by labor of workers that they did not give to workers. Where did the investment, the thing that they invested in, if they bought a factory, that's an investment. Where did the factory come from? It was created by labor. there are certain things where you've got like a chicken and the egg argument, right? Like, okay, what came first? Did the chicken come first, or did the egg come first? Well, with wealth, there's no chicken and egg argument. It's like looking at a fully grown chicken and saying, I don't know, did this come from an egg or not? Like this individual chicken, did it come from an egg? Of course it came from an egg. When you look at wealth, any wealth that has been created in the history of the world came from labor.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out because we glossed over, we talked about the Haymarket Affair and the bomb that was thrown, but we glossed over the events leading up to the Haymarket Affair and what was the reason for the Haymarket Affair and the protests and the fact that these folks were protesting for an 8-hour day, an 8-hour work day, a legal 8-hour work day in America. And that many of them have been working under oppressive system of 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. And they had the radical idea that there should be 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours for the worker. And I don't think that was such a radical idea. A lot of people take that for granted these days, especially in America. You constantly hear that unions are no longer needed. They served a purpose in the day, but they're no longer needed. But we are slowly getting back to a longer than an 8-hour day in order to make ends meet. Most people are working at least one job and excess of 8 hours a day, and many people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, just to be able to buy food, to have a respectable, and in many cases not even a respectable place to live. And so these workers had come together and decided they were going to organize for an 8-hour day and go on strike. And what's rarely talked about is the police and the government sending in troops to basically execute people in the streets. And so, you know, the weeks leading up to this was extremely violent. Mainly the violence was based on the police that the capitalists had sent in to quell the protests, and the government military that had been sent in to quell the protests. And so, you know, yes, there was a bomb thrown that killed, I think, 3 or 4 policemen and several innocent bystanders that was in the protest. The entire, if you go back and look at any history of the Haymarket Affair, everyone without question says that the trials were rigged, that the jury was rigged, and they executed people just because they were actually fighting for the workers' rights, and they did not want to allow these people to walk free in the streets again because they were excellent organizers.
Right, and that's and you know, that's something that folks, you know, we talk about how you know, soldiers you know, sacrifice and have died for our freedoms and liberties and things like that. And there's certainly some truth to that. You know, World War II was important in securing our freedom and freedom of people overseas from fascists. And you know, that's important to understand. But unfortunately, and I don't even think that this is a controversial opinion anymore. If this was 20 years ago, it might have been. But now, you know, I think we recognize that most of our overseas excursions don't secure our freedoms. You know, when we're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, our freedoms aren't in Iraq and Afghanistan. But when we talk about workers fighting and dying in the streets for our freedoms on and from the job, there's a direct line from workers being killed by the state to the freedoms and liberties we have today. We're going to talk more about that on the other side.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Charged for the land, a population burned up, bled dry. The marginalized multiply.
is International Workers' Day. It is the real Labor Day, May the 1st. It is the real Labor Day, May the 1st. And we were talking about, on the other side of the break, I just want to remind you, we are open for boss bashing on this International Workers' Day, this holiest of days, May the 1st, International Workers' Day. We are open for boss bashing, 1-866-494-9866, and I think we've got a caller, and we're going to go to him in just a second. We're going to wrap up our thoughts about, Adam had something to say about the freedoms, but I just wanted to underscore again, like I said, World War II, when we liberated Europe from the fascists, that is important, and there was real freedom securing there. But I don't recall our freedoms having been brought back from Iraq and Afghanistan yet. We can take a direct line from the state murdering people in Haymarket and the state murdering Joe Hill in Utah to our freedoms, our 8-hour workday, the weekend, anything that you like about your job, somebody fought and died for. Anything that you don't like about your job, you're going to have to fight for to make it better. You may not have to die for it today, but you may not have to die for it today because of the sacrifices that people made 100 years ago. And so you should take advantage of the opportunities that you have to organize, because it is hard to organize today, but you are most likely not going to be murdered for it, and that's because of the fights that and the foundation that was laid before us.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, here lately, who knows?
Yeah, there's been some people that have been hit by there was a striking coal miner down in Brookwood that scab drove into his house.
Literally, drove into his house drunk. Mm-hmm. So
but what about the violent union thugs? But this is violent scabs anyway.
Right,
Adam?
and I think we need to remember that outside of the United States, many union organizers and activists are facing similar conditions that these folks faced back in the 1880s.
Yeah,
and you can be murdered if you're in Colombia or a number of
Coca-Cola.
Absolutely.
Coca-Cola in South America murdered.
Yes, and that's
hundreds.
Folks talk about these corporations are leftist ideologues because they have anti-racism training. That anti-racism training that corporations do is just cover up BS. So it's performative woke culture war BS. It doesn't mean anything.
And their lawyers told them to do that to help them win EEOC claims.
Yeah, if it meant anything, they wouldn't be doing it. The Coca-Cola doing this, it's the same company that literally, like David said, murdered Colombian trade unionists less than 15 years ago. Screw Coca-Cola and screw people telling you that they're that they're socialists. They're not. Looks like we've got another call. Adam, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to emphasize that, it is a day to remember those sacrifices. People who organize on the job, people who just demand dignity as a worker face, numerous threats, whether it's today or in the past. And yes, that has included murder. It's included arrest. It's included assault. It's included intimidation, harassment, firing, blacklisting. These are all tactics that have been used on organizers and just ordinary workers who had the audacity to demand respect and dignity on the job.
Yeah.
And David mentioned earlier about some folks who like to say that unions were useful back in those days.
Right.
Well, we're quickly returning to those days. We are returning to the Gilded Age by almost any metric.
If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments and release them throughout the week. We upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps, so to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can find our fantastic union-made hats. Adam is modeling one on the stream for us right now. They're $35. They include shipping. And you can also get stickers, stuff like that, on thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to keep us on the air, consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport.